Nowadays, everybody trying to talk like they got something to say, but nothing comes out when they move their lips. Um, just a bunch of gibberish. I'd like to point out that this is a tiresome debate. It's a tiresome argument. I'm tired of it, mostly because, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. And this is my last take on it. Bottom line, I put out a tweet that was true and factual, but some people didn't like it. They didn't like it. Good news, about 95% of them liked it, but it always spurs up this argument, this very tiresome, irrelevant in the grand scheme of things argument as to what manga is and what the difference is between manga and comics are, if any. Same thing with like anime and what is an anime and all of that, touching on one of our series, Clock Striker, and even my series, Apple Black. This video will be the complete breakdown of it, how this also touches on some blackwashing type issues. Other creators have touched on it a little bit. Shout out to you, Muhammad. But this is my breakdown, my views. Take it or leave it. First, let's start with a tweet. Shonen Manga's first black female protagonist is here. That's it. Over 90,000 likes. Everybody showing love. Shout out to y'all. Now, maybe I should have been more specific, because while protagonist could mean main character, it could also mean some of the other key characters. But in the following tweets, I wanted to specify that I was referring to main character. The first tweet, it's kind of like a headline. The following tweets then go into more detail, showing more artwork, some of the pages, visuals that I felt that would put the series in the best light and connect with the most people. I talked about what was inside the book, how many pages you're going to see, post-credit scene, and then some extra visuals. Once you see it, if you get it, you get it. Another one where I shared the story synopsis. Remember that. I shared what the series was about. Naruto got ninjas, One Piece got pirates, Clock Striker has engineers. Top tier engineers are clocksmiths, and a clock striker is an assistant. Cast here aspires to be a clocksmith. Smiths are rarely women, definitely rarely black girls who are physically disabled. In fact, one of the few rare ones is the one she's striking for, Philomena Clock, who you can see in the back. But then she has a robotic arm. It's basically a mobile lab that she made by herself. Fun, action, adventure, the usual mainstream shonen stuff, but with Western, authentic tendencies. Extra artwork with our characters and suits. Sharing the killer art and dialogue, art by Isaka. I'll go into a little bit more detail about all that. Tweets there where I specify, even though manga literally translates to comics, I'm talking about manga with that Japanese approach to making comics like a Naruto or Full Metal. About the year it was released. The series launched in 2014, and issue 32 is where the story began, but issues before that we were already teasing it. We're on the cover of Neo Magazine UK, an anime manga entertainment magazine, discussed as being the potential future of anime and manga. All kinds of people showing love, even some people showing that they ordered it immediately. So much so, when it comes to the shonen category on Amazon, it was third most wished for. Prior to this tweet, it was the 2 millionth-ish book on Amazon out of tens of millions of books, but after the tweet, it shot up to 2,000. Majority of people showing love, shut up and take my money. Some who don't read saying we're wrong and referencing Afro Samurai when I specifically said female. People who read the first 3 chapters for free on pilotmanga.com saying they loved it. People from all over the world, Brazil, pre-ordering and sharing that love. People saying Michiko and Hachin exist. Again, read, I said shonen manga, not anime. And then Michiko is also a seinen, I believe. Some people having fun with the logo. This is juvenile, but I don't really have any issue. You guys can have fun with that if you want. Some saying it's not a manga. Some saying it's not the first dark-skinned. I didn't say dark, I said black. Just some people trying to discredit you when they really don't have any basis. Some more arguments. You guys can go to the tweets and, check it all out if you're curious. And then a couple memes here and there. Some that I thought were hilarious. Sometimes they'll reference something, maybe the character was black, but it doesn't even matter because this series here, for instance, came out, I believe, in 2019, and we're talking about Clock Striker that debuted in 2014. Constantly trying to discredit by referencing characters who aren't black. People claiming that an Arabian character is black and anything under the sun, just to feel, I guess, right, when really you're not. But okay. Of course, they bring up Yorichi, but she's not the main character now, is she? And even some people don't think Yorichi's black, which that's a whole nother can of worms. Some people thinking, oh, the Japanese not going to consider this manga. They clearly have international manga awards, so they do consider it manga, and I explain in greater detail. Manga really is just comics, and they actually do this awards to encourage more foreigners to make manga. Calling it a comic is still accurate, but calling it manga isn't inaccurate, as you can read, predominantly positive. People talking about it's amazing, they pre-ordered, they checked it out, they love what they're seeing, they feel seen and represented. Maybe they checked it out and they read it and they loved it, and they're sharing it so more people can see it. Some people talking about crying, some people loving the artwork, character design, world building, the story they read from the tweet thread, and then some other people smoking the tiny percentage of people who are trying to piss in the cereal. But as you can see, it's generally all love. Got some love from some Japanese people, some who actually work in this space, in this industry, talking about getting it for themselves as a birthday present, which I thought was really nice. People from all over the world tweeting about it, having a blast. Some of my favorite quote retweets over here. I love this one because it goes against the whole diversity doesn't matter. I think representation matters. It generally shouldn't be the only selling point. I think story and art are paramount. They are very important because if those suck, then everything kind of falls apart. But for some, diversity is a selling point, and to pretend like nobody cares is ridiculous. Even showing that the character looks like her and feeling some kind of way positively. That's a W. People calling out the hypocrisy or the random criticism, even when you make your own original characters, which I think is 100% valid. Here, they're being sarcastic where they show this character as some people trying to be in the comments like, oh, this is not the first, and they reference a character that looks like this, proving my point. Funny memes, again, from people all over the industry, even voice actors. Our CEO, Frederick, with the CEO of Media Do, a Japanese international company that distributes our manga digitally. And Media Do also owns My Anime List. This has been covered by Anime News Network, Crunchyroll, and so much more. So these are people in the industry that have zero issues with anything, but somehow some internet folk think they know more. Twitter is a funny place because that image kind of burns, right? The whole point is, oh, the Japanese will never see. Well, guess what? Manga and comics are the same thing. Ultimately, they're the same thing. If you're being very technical about the term, they are the same thing. A couple pictures in sequential order telling a story. So is Manhwa or Manhwa. It's just a different language, all translating to the same thing. Depending on the country, they're handled differently. The difference lies in language and culture. We're in Japan doing a lot of work and putting out a lot of content. There's a lot of pride in that. And so they're able to put out a lot of content weekly, even sometimes till they're sick. And if you take days off, everybody even looks at you funny. Then to be cheap, it's not in color. They're more focused on the quality of the story and the dynamism and how the complexity of the story from that end. Not that others aren't, but they're more worried about that than everything being in color and flashy and expensive. The reading orientation from right to left is not what makes it manga. That's just the reading orientation there originating in Japan. That's how you read it in Japan. That's what the publishers want. That's what the publishers or the creator decided that they're going to go for. Because in Japan, that's how it's read. But if it's going to be published here in the West, the reading orientation can be flipped. Because here in the West, we read from left to right. There are a bunch of other visually stylistic things that you would find more in Japanese comics. Japanese comics, Japanese manga. Manga doesn't mean Japanese comics, even though here in the West, we would kind of use that to refer to it. I'm not an idiot. I understand the nuance of it. But technically, manga is just comics. Therefore, you can have Japanese manga, French manga, Korean manga, which, again, due to language, might not be referred to as manga and be referred to as manhwa, but that comes with its own cultural differences, where they're more used to the scroll format of reading that you would find on a tapas or a webtoon. Or manhwa, which I believe is China. And then comics here, everything is a little bit more expensive. In Korea with manhwa, they do things in color as well, but it's mostly digital. Here in the West, also color, but we care about the flash. We care about all that. That's why you get less content versus in Japan, where you get like 30 pages of an issue, but it's in color, it's in flash, the quality is great. Sometimes it gets compiled into a graphic novel later on, but still, they care about the flash of it, and the pizzazz, and the color, and the wow. Hence why sometimes it can be more expensive. The differences are just the differences in culture and the way comics are handled. But the actual term is the same. Sometimes it's just more comfortable to use the term manga because I understand what visuals are going to pop up in your mind, so it makes sense. You're going to be thinking of that, black and white grayscale tone approach that you would find in Japanese comics. But, at the same time, it's still a comic. Whether you call it comic or manga really doesn't matter.
Well, manga is basically just means comics, actually, and in Japanese. And you'll find it, like if you go to a Japanese bookstore, it'll have the heading will say komiku. In Japanese, manga means all kinds of comics. It's not just manga, comics made in Japan or made in a certain side. In fact, I would argue there is a manga influence in a lot of comics. I mean, whether it says or not. Whenever people say like, oh, there's a manga style, that's like saying there's a movie style. It's a medium, not a genre. There are all kinds of ways of drawing manga and manga storytelling. There's some things that are very unique to manga, like the black and white and the read from right to left, and the way that the storytelling can be very decompressed, meaning like sometimes you'll have like these double page spreads and you have this dynamic action. And the way that manga is published in Japanese is a lot of times it's in weekly or monthly magazines. They're very good at the cliffhanger. And that's one thing that makes manga really appealing to people, is that, they get you in there with the characters and the story, and then you're hooked. You want to keep reading because the survival of these stories depend on reader feedback, right? Like reader cards, like if they fall down in the rankings, they get canceled. And so that's the thing with manga. It's like manga has a great formula, great look. Everyone who looks at it will say, yes, this looks definitely different than American comics, look definitely different than French BD. But I guess one thing I wanted to maybe bring up in this conversation is that our world is melding, in that like there's a lot of American comic artists. Like I think Jim Lee, for example, is very influenced by manga. A whole bunch of the Image Comics guys were influenced by Battle Angel Alita, for example. You see like French artists with there's a guy named who does a comic called Radiant from France.
Tony Valente, manga artist and the creator of the manga Radiant with 2 seasons of anime out. Shout out to Tony Valente. Tony endorsed our whole manga line, and you can check out his quote.
Because you have solid backgrounds. I saw that.
You have solid backgrounds.
Thank you. But
you have solid backgrounds.
No, you.
Yeah. No, you.
Beautiful manga style, artwork, and storytelling. But he brings a certain French sensibility to it. So I think when I say manga, for my purposes as a manga journalist, I usually use that to refer to comics from Japan, originally published in Japan for a Japanese audience. But that's an artificial distinction.
It's kind of like soccer and football. It's handled very different. The divisions and the playoffs are handled very different here in the US versus, say, in Europe or Brazil, where they have leagues and you have promotion and relegation. It's handled differently there. That's the difference, but ultimately it's the same sport. So that's on the culture type aspect of things. And then the language side of things is, if I call my series a manga, I'm still accurate. I can call it a comic, I can call it a manga, I can call it a manhwa. I understand the jolt of confusion that pops into your head, but technically I'm not wrong. If I call my grandma abuela, I'm still correct, even though I'm not Spanish. Right? See? To just blanket say that it's only manga if it's made in Japan is messy, because when it's challenged, you see how ridiculous it actually sounds.
And to a purist, they believe that manga can only be Japanese. And I have my series of kind of questions that kind of, I think, degrades that argument, the logic behind that. It's not combative, but it degrades the logic, because what does Japanese mean ultimately? Is that DNA? What if you're a Japanese person who grew up in New York? Can you then make manga because it's in your blood? Or what if you're a Black person who grew up in Japan, was born there and spent your entire life in Japan, of which I know a few? And,
me too. I'm with exactly.
Yes. What if that happens to you? Are you not allowed to make manga? Is that not pure? So I think that the whole sort of notion of, it has to be Japanese is kind of faulty in its logic to begin with.
So what if a Japanese person made the comic but in a different country? Is it still manga then? Or what if they're not Japanese but maybe half of the team is Japanese? Is it manga then? Or does it only have to be manga if it's published by a Japanese company? Is it manga then? Or what if the company owns other it's messy.
Because manga is so dominant in Japan that, as you said, a young person will dream of being a mangaka, just like they'll dream of being a rapper in the States.
That's right.
Chances of happening are freaking rare, but they will dream of that because that, at the end of the day, is what it's such a prevalent thing.
You already have a couple popular series out there that do not have Japanese creators, that nobody bats an eye when calling them manga. Somehow, it's an issue here. I wonder why. If somebody makes a Spiderman comic but makes it in Japan for Marvel here in the West, what is it manga then because they actually drew it in Japan? Or what if Marvel just creates a new thing and wants to start a new system in Japan and they have their publication there, but it's still published left to right, color, all of that, so it's still manga? Then it's manga, or is it not? It's a mess. It's all semantics. So when you're trying to be technical is actually when it's the most clear. Manga and comics are just the same thing. In Japan, a Thor comic, a Spiderman comic is also referred to as manga. The floppy thing is called.
So when people have challenged me, and you said it so right in the past a few minutes ago about just the idea, because I've actually used that example, and I've never heard you say it, but I'm so happy to hear you say it about music, because I compare animated music all the time, especially hip hop, right? Manga, in a lot of ways, is very similar to hip hop. Hip hop is a uniquely Black thing. It's a unique Black American thing. That doesn't mean there aren't people who do hip hop in Canada or the UK. That doesn't mean there aren't people who do hip hop who look like, who look like you, Emily, or look like, someone different from you and I, right? We just had the Super Bowl, and one of the greatest hip hop artists of all time, Eminem, performed there amongst other luminaries in the hip hop space, all of which were Black except for Eminem. And I don't think anyone looks at Eminem and thinks that he's not hip hop. The thing about Eminem in that example is that, because he's a great example, is that there have been white rappers before, but what Eminem did is respect the craft and respect those who created the craft, so that he was able to innovate by recognizing, as we say in the Black community, he stood on the shoulders of giants and he never acted like he was the giant. And I think that sort of element of it is where you have the respect. And I think with Saturday AM, that's what we try to do. So I find the conversation to be a bit disingenuous because we find a way somehow to not have these concerns when we want it to fit the narrative that we want. At the end of the day, manga is just comics. That's really all it is. So people who've never been in Japan, as someone who has been in Japan, let me educate you. It's just comics. It's just comics. Again, the only people who ever seem to have an issue with it are people who don't actually live in Japan and are not actually Japanese. It's just comics. And so if you're going to have that discussion about, well, what is it actually if it's not featuring Asian characters? Well, then you perhaps should take that up with the Japanese, because they would look at Iron Man or Spider-Man and just consider them American manga. And I've literally had that discussion with them. So that literally is true.
Last time I was in Japan, whenever I spoke to someone and they said, what do you do? And I said, I work for a North American manga publisher. And every single response for a Japanese person was, oh, like Spider-Man? That's that when they heard the word manga, they thought Spider-Man, they thought Marvel, DC, so I thought that was fascinating.
I was talking about this with somebody the other day because, Saturday AM has a strong relationship with the Japanese community. We're talking to a big company right now to Japan for some stuff that we hope to announce soon. We've done partnerships with Wacom and Celsius, which makes Clip Studio Paint, and Sakura, which makes the markers. These are three of the biggest companies who most of the manga you may read today or comic books for that matter are created by or use the tools of these companies. And so I say that, and so my point in saying that is that as a 48-year-old man who's been traveling around the world, been involved in business and entertainment for years, I've never heard someone Japanese make that comment. So again, I don't know the sincerity of those comments sometimes, because the Japanese never seem to have that issue. And we've talked to many Japanese, we do a lot of business with them. It seems to be more so from people who want to create the idea that manga can only exist the way they want it to exist.
Like I'm reading a lot of webtoons nowadays, like a lot of Korean comics. And if no one told me it was from Korea, I would say, oh yeah, it's enjoyable. It's like manga. Like you can kind of tell, but like you can go to a sushi bar that has Korean chef, you go, like, kind of different, but still sushi. There's things about manga that make it unique and compelling, and it's useful sometimes to say, this is manga, this is a genre, this is a style of comics. But I think this definition is getting very much looser every day.
When you hear from the people who actually do this stuff and who actually have spoken to the Japanese, it's never nearly the controversy that people would like for it to be. So
they might have an abbreviation here and there where it's like ame comic, but that's an abbreviation. It's not language. They just call it manga. And ame comic is American comics, but that's just an abbreviation. They still call these things manga. Japan has multiple international manga competitions. They call it manga. And go look at the entries. You have creators from the US, Taiwan, UAE, England, Brazil, Italy. The list goes on, and they still call it manga. Not because of the way it looks, because all the comics you would see, they look very different, vastly different from one another in style, in production, right? Sometimes the reading orientation is left to right. There is a freedom with that, so they're not sticklers for it. So it doesn't matter whether your comic is left to right or right to left, still take it. And they still call it manga. They call all of it manga. In fact, there was a very Western looking comic. I.e. also Western manga that was in it that had more of the Western look that was still considered manga. It's just a language thing. Quick Google search. The International Manga Award is an annual award established to encourage non-Japanese manga artists in 2007. You can clearly see many Japanese manga awards for internationals, with prizes that come with deals, publication, some cases serialization, money, sponsored by all kinds of companies. With a lot of these entries, you can also see what countries they're from. Osamu Tezuka, known as the god of manga, was named after this one, the Tezuka Manga Award, with the judges being famous Japanese manga artists, judging entries from all over the world. I believe one of the top entries was from France, Japan International Manga Award. The winners of these are really from all over the place. Korea, China, Taiwan, the UK, Philippines, Brazil, Spain, France. Just look at them. I'm not making any of this up. And I'm pretty sure the title says Manga Awards, not Comic Awards, because the person's not from Japan or because they're from a Western country. They just call it manga. Is it Japanese manga? No. Unless maybe they are from Japan, or there is something tying it to Japan, but it's still manga. And the list goes on. There are endless awards that are out there. There was even a very Western quote-unquote comic, which is still a manga, I Kill Giants, that won the International Manga Award one year, which I believe was the first time an American won. And the comic has like color. In fact, it's very Western in its production, but it's still considered manga. Manga Plus. It's by the Japanese. You have a lot of creators from all over the world posting your comics on there, and they still use the term manga. Now, if you use the term comic, are you wrong? No, you're not wrong. When you call my comic/manga a manga or comic, it doesn't offend me. But the issue is when you're trying to come at me with the actually, oh, it's a comic, not a manga. You're not making any sense. You're not really thinking through what you're saying. Then you have the Tezuka Award. That's another manga contest that came through. Creators from all over the world. Though, in fact, I believe someone who took second place was from, I believe, France. And first place was definitely not Japan. It was from somewhere, but not Japan. I can't remember. You have Viz, who create what I refer to as Western manga. It's just Western because it's created here in the West. It originates here in the West. But it's also manga. You could call it a comic, but you can also call it a manga as a nod to the style of production, that Japanese style of production that was used to create it, right? So it actually seems and feels and sets in as more fitting than just calling it a Western comic just because of the visuals that it evokes. But you won't be wrong, which is my point. Call it a comic, call it a manga, doesn't matter. If I pick up any of the Viz originals, Viz is American, and it's primarily published in the West. So even though it's still manga, the reading orientation here was done from left to right because that was the decision the publishers made, or the publishers and the artists. But somebody higher up made that decision. Sometimes some of these artists were already making comics and then they got adopted and signed deals. They're already making their manga left to right, so maybe Viz just went that way. Or that person already knew that their original publication was here in the West, and so they stuck with left to right, and Viz just kept that going. Even the ones that Viz helped fund start from scratch, those were done left to right as well. Viz is owned by Japanese conglomerates Shogakukan, Shueisha. These are the people behind Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, Dragon Ball. Making original manga here in the West as well, but it's left to right. This One Punch Man comic, this One Punch Man right here in my hand, it's a manga, right? No, nobody disputes that. But do you dispute that it's also a comic? Does that make sense to you? This is a comic. Graphic novel, comic, manga, manhwa, you name it, right? You just use the word that, works best for you visually. And so sometimes the first thing that comes to mind, just because of language and the nuances here in the West, you would say manga, but if you say comic, are you wrong? No. You have creators from all over the world. Tony Valente from France, who has his manga/comic/whatever you want to call it.
It was just people that didn't want me to make a manga and telling me, no, you should stop making manga because that's not your country. You're appropriating some other cultures and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so
yeah, tell that to I don't
to
know,
people wearing shoes, for example.
Sure. Huge inspiration to many, especially those who aren't Japanese and want to make manga. One of the most popular French manga artists in the world.
We make manga. Bottom line.
Read in Japan, endorsed by Yusuke Murata, Hiro Mashima, the creator of One Punch Man and Fairy Tail, respectively, who love his work.
So you have the volume,
yeah,
and there's something around, like a band around the volume with some words and a drawing from Yusuke Murata, just to
an endorsement.
Yeah, as an endorsement. For the first one, that was Yusuke Murata. For the second one, same with Hiro Mashima.
Multiple translations all over the world, I imagine. Has 2 seasons of anime that you can find on Crunchyroll. So what? It's not an anime, it's a cartoon because he's French. Doesn't make sense. And then you have people saying, oh, comic, manga, manhwa with a different spelling, at least in the English way. And then Manfra, manga, France. Manfra. That's it. That's all that is. Tony Valente, the creator of Radiant, who endorsed our manga, by the way. If you look at the back, you can see some endorsements. We have endorsements and reviews from all over the place, but here we have one from Tony Valente at the back of a couple of our books, even a couple from Sanford Green. Shout out to Tony for that. Really appreciate it, especially someone as accomplished as him. But here's what Tony had to say about Manfra. Also, I've heard the term Manfra.
It's awful.
Manfra. Obviously, this conversation bleeds into anime as well. What is anime? What isn't? Is Boondocks anime? Is Avatar anime? And to that, again, these arguments are irrelevant. But if you ask for my 2 cents, technically, they're anime. Boondocks is anime. Avatar is anime. If you try and get into all this semantic stuff, it's just a mess to explain for all the reasons I've touched on so far. Is it a cartoon? Sure. Is it Japanese anime? Not really, because the idea originates from here in the West. But is it anime? Yes, because anime just means animation, not necessarily Japanese animation. It's just a language thing. Like abuela doesn't mean Spanish grandma, it just means grandma. Some people try to put their little gatekeepy, semantic-y type definitions to it, but it's not that deep. So our series here with Apple Black and Clock Striker, they're not Japanese manga, they're Western manga or international manga or OEL.
And so when you came, I don't know if you came up with the term OEL, but
no, we actually called it OGM back in the day. At least internally, we didn't really market that term, but we called it OGM, which was basically manga but original, and so OG, it was OGM. Yep. That's what we called it back in the day.
Who called it OEL then? Because that term.
I think it was like an industry journalist type person. But the reason why we never really subscribed to that term OEL is because a lot of the books we were making were actually not in English or Japanese originally. So we're like, well, why are we going to call it original English language when we got stuff that was originally in Spanish or in French? It's like.
And these are also terms that people like to Wikipedia. Those are also available there. I don't know what to tell you. Again, I understand the nuance. I understand when you're talking to someone, especially when they're not really that deep into it, and you say cartoon and you say anime just to have that separation. And anime is kind of like a buzzword a little bit in some circles. I get it. I'm not out there trying to actually correct everybody. But don't try and correct me when technically I'm right. If you call it a comic, you're also right. That doesn't offend me. It's the truth. I understand how weird it sounds to pull this up and call it manhwa. I get it. But technically, though, it is. This is manhwa too. But I also understand why you would refrain from using that word, because maybe it might evoke a different visual response or not what you're going for.
But that's an artificial distinction.
So I like to say, oh, you have to be Japanese to make it's a tired argument. It's tired. I'm over it. I'm over it. It doesn't hold up. There are many successful creators who aren't Japanese. Boom. When that argument dies, they're like, oh, it has to be made in Japan and published by a Japanese company. Even that doesn't hold up. Even here, it doesn't hold up because our books, again, are partly going to be distributed digitally by Media Do. You can find all the press releases on Anime News Network, Crunchyroll, all these websites talking about it, where our books will be published digitally, at least in part, with Media Do, a Japanese company, help spreading it worldwide, including Japan. So we've worked with Japanese CEOs, we've talked to Japanese people, even some Japanese people on Twitter who said the same thing. It is manga. The creators, whether they're international or Japanese or wherever they're from, it's manga. So when you're arguing against this, you're kind of like arguing against all of them and all of their credibility versus yours, who 9 times out of 10, the people who have these arguments, they're not Japanese. They've never been to Japan. All they know about is through anime. And I'm not saying you have to have been to Japan or you need to be able to speak the language. It's not that deep. But my point is, you're so fired up and you don't truly know what you're talking about or have nearly as much credibility as all the people who agree with what we're saying. So it's kind of weird. Like you had the Tower of God stuff, the high school, what, God of High School stuff, what, is that anime? Or because it's originating from Korea, it's not? Like, it's a mess. So just let it be. And then they hamper down on the reading orientation. Oh, it has to be. Especially when I explain in my tweet, I'm referring to comics made with that Japanese approach to making comics. Even though when I say manga, which means comic, means everything, right? I specified in the tweet to comics made with that Japanese aesthetic, and I gave examples like a Naruto or Full Metal Alchemist. And I only use those examples because they're very similar to Clock Striker in a few ways, in a couple ways. But then when I say Japanese approach, they think, okay, but the comic isn't right to left. But that's because it's not published in Japan. It's not a Japanese manga. And we made the conscious decision to go left to right. Even Viz has original manga that is left to right. You go to Barnes & Noble in the manga section, where you can find our comics as well in the manga section in Barnes & Noble, Walmart, you name it. The people who, thankfully, the people who we care about, whether they see it this way, manga and comics, and the nuances between them and understanding the differences while understanding that they're essentially at their core the same, agree with us. Hence why we're in the manga sections. So you can find the Viz comics that are also left to right in the manga sections. The reading orientation is a decision you make, you and your publisher and your whatever, based off of the country where it's going to be published and so on. It's not what makes manga. And guess what? Even back in the day when Japanese comics were moving from Japan to the West and everybody was learning about Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball and all of that, the books, obviously, they were right to left, but a lot of stores wanted them to flip it to left to right because it's coming here in the West, but it was too expensive to do that, so they marketed it as, ooh, look at this book in the opposite reading orientation. It is different. It is manga. It is a completely new category, but ultimately it's the same. It was just a marketing thing that stuck.
And then Cartoon Network decided to put Sailor Moon on TV, and that broke it open. It allowed us to get into some retail shops, Walden Books being kind of the first one. And then we were able to take that and work towards bringing in more and more and more manga until finally in the year 2000, we did this big thing that was the authentic way, which is when we did all of our books right to left.
Okay, that's what I was going to get to, is when you made that pivot to the traditional Japanese orientation.
Back then, we decided that we were going to flip the books so that they would read left to right, literally mirroring the images, which of course created a whole new set of problems. Right-handed characters are now left-handed, signs are now backwards. It solved for one problem and created new ones. And eventually, though, obviously, people have become far more comfortable with Japanese culture. It's sort of permeated a lot more people's knowledge, and now we don't have those same issues of are people going to understand this? There's such a hardcore, passionate fan base for manga and anime.
Yeah, and that finally, people thought we were insane, and we had no intention of doing it as a test. Even within our company, I remember my COO at the time came to me and said, we had just raised money, and he came to me and said, we got to test this thing out. We can't just suddenly publish books reading backwards. What if it doesn't work? We're out of business. And I said, the thing is, if we do a test, then of course the bookstores, they're going to put the books that read the normal way in the front, and then the books that don't read that way, that are the opposite way, they may not even put them on the shelf. So it's going to be a test that will be destined to fail from the beginning. And no, we either go all the way and we just put all the chips on the table, or we don't. And I convinced the team, well, at the end of the day, it was my decision. But that one, we're in. We're going all out, all or none. And so we ran with it, and we did displays. We did all these new titles at the same time. We promoted it, and we told all the bookshops, they can get these displays for free. And that's when the industry people talked about us. They said we were insane, and we launched it, and thank God it worked.
Right, I was going to say.
It stuck too well to where people like to separate manga and comics, when really,
we sold in a whole bunch of them. It was all on our risk. Like, if it didn't sell, we were paying for all of it, and we were already paying them floor money, space money for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think did it, because it worked. And then the buyers started to take it seriously. They would start to buy in other things. Other publishers started to put out stuff. And then before you knew it, there was that category you talked to in the stores that said manga, and it's been there ever since,
Well, that covers most of is Apple Black, is Clock Striker, our series manga. That covers most of it. The only thing that maybe I missed was some people try to say, oh, if that's the case, then why do you say manga inspired comics? And again, it's not that deep. When you go into the crux of it, what I'm saying is what it is. Manga is comics. You say manga inspired comics, what we're really saying is that Japanese approach to making comics, but that's too long of a line. And at the end of the day, you still get the point. That's all this is. We're saying something to get the point across so you know what you're picking up. And at the end of the day, it is still not wrong. Sounds a little bit redundant to a degree, but it's still not wrong.
When I say manga, for my purposes as a manga journalist, I usually use that to refer to comics from originally published in Japan for a Japanese audience. But that's an artificial distinction.
Especially when the casual person, the casual consumer doesn't go into too deep about this manga and comic difference. And so for some of them, they do see manga and comics as two different things, like I just explained. We also want to reach those kinds of people. It doesn't take away from the point that I am making right now, which is the truth. Manga and comics essentially are the same thing. It's just a different language. It leads up to the next issue that some people started to challenge once they saw they couldn't challenge the first one, or it's just too messy a discussion, was, is she really the first? All kinds of weird arguments popped out of this, and I'm convinced nobody really wants to read anything. Nobody really reads the full thread, because there were people saying some of the craziest things. Someone said, oh, it's not the first. What about Afro Samurai? I'm specifically talking about female. Then they'll bring up some characters that aren't even black, which is kind of proving my point. It's so bad people are trying to claim Piccolo's black. That's how bad it is. And a lot of times I think these people just initially triggered. Arguing with them sometimes is pointless, especially when you go look at their actual feed and see all the other crazy stuff they be into. It's the same thing with the Ariel stuff and the Shaggy stuff. It doesn't matter. Again, when it comes to comics done with the Japanese approach to making comics, not including the reading orientation, but comics like that, she is the first undeniably black. I'm not talking, oh, is she black? Isn't she? There is no question as to whether she's black or not. And then she is the main character, the main protagonist, not a side character, not sharing the spotlight with someone, or it's arguable who the main character is it character A or character B, or they share it equally. No. Undeniably black, undeniably the main character. And the first, seeing as the comic came out originally in 2014. And then I'm using the term manga or comics, but made with that Japanese approach to making comics. She is the first. Then some people are like, oh my God, well, that's so specific. Maybe if you read the full thread, it wouldn't be an issue and we won't be having this conversation. Why did you feel such an urge to challenge it if it's so specific? You can't help they can't help themselves. And again, they don't care. Sometimes they'll post a random tweet and then go on Reddit, share their tweet on Reddit, and beg people to go like the tweet. It's like, what? You have a lot of time. You have a lot of time, sir. And with everything I've said so far, if you still disagree, fine. You're also disagreeing with all the professionals and Japanese people and facts that are out there. But hey, you still disagree? I can't help you. I cannot. An original black character. This isn't even a blackwashing type situation, but you will notice a lot of the quote retweets, again, majority of the people who saw the tweets were positive, and shout outs to y'all. And I'm talking like 95%. The great black variants of the characters, they say go create your own characters. Go create characters, they're still mad. Doesn't matter what you do. Being a part of the internet for this long, I'm used to it now. I get it. I do. This video is kind of like my last hurrah. Anybody comes with it, I just tag them the video. The video's too long, you don't want to watch it, then you're not. Then I care even less now. Because here's the point. What's more important than these arguments is actually the critical response of the series, like the story and the art and all of that, like a critical response, as well as commercial response, where people support it because they like it critically. Hopefully it translates to being a commercial success as well. There are other things, but those are the two up there things that matter, more so than whether somebody calls it a manga or a comic or a manhwa or a whatever. And obviously you have the anti-diversity crowd who are like, oh, nobody cares that the character is the first black anything. Then why you promoting it as that? Where was this energy when Marvel did it? In the 90s and the 80s. Like the debut of Wolverine was first Canadian superhero. And that's the Wolverine. One of the most popular superheroes or heroes, whatever you want to call them, of all time. 2, it's just facts. Is it not facts? Facts should not trigger you. Don't care about your feelings, right? Don't care about your feelings. You don't have to be snowflakey or triggered about it. It's just facts. It's like, oh, why did you have to say it? Why not have the tweet be about the story? People do care about the fact that it is the first black female lead. Mind you, this is all after all the first attacks don't work. Now it's about, oh, this doesn't even matter anyways. Well, it does, clearly. Maybe it doesn't matter to you, the hubris to think that the world revolves around you, when clearly there are other people who care about it. Diversity is important. It is important that people see themselves in their heroes. Nobody cares when clearly people care. The story and the art are selling points, but the diversity, for some, is also a selling point. Hence why we mention it. It also makes the content easier to find for those who are looking for this type of content specifically. If you're searching for a series with a black female lead today, especially if you're looking for one within that manga aesthetic, that Japanese approach to making comics, if you search that, you know what the first thing that pops out is? You guessed it. Why? Because we talk about it in this way. Go make your own comic and promote it how you want to promote it. But also, the other tweets in the thread did go into detail about the story. they did go into detail about the details of the pages and how many pages you're going to get in volume 1 and all the fun stuff that's going to be in it, the post-credit scene, showcasing some of the cool art in the inside pages and all that kind of stuff. But the first tweet, kind of like a headline for an article, needs to be the most eye-catching, wowing, eye-opening thing. And that's what that was. And that was reflected in how viral the tweet went. They said, oh, that's not great marketing. That's not great. You're talking about a comic now with so much ferocity about a comic that you did not know prior to the tweet. Hence, the tweet worked. Another good thing that came out of this is for all those who were so triggered by it, it was just a list for people to block. It was a good list for everybody to see, okay, this is someone worth blocking. You're welcome. Coming at me with their full concern when they didn't have that same energy for all the other projects that are out there that do mention the diversity in the series. And now they try to frame it like that's all I mentioned, when clearly I mentioned everything else. You don't want to read the tweet. They're just triggered. You know what's funny? There's like 2 of them who actually went on to read the free 3 chapters that are available on pilotmanga.com for Clock Striker. And they liked it. But then because they liked it, they were like, they still want to find something to, it's like, oh, I like it, but I just didn't like how you promoted it. Now you know about a comic that you didn't know about otherwise. It worked. Leading with just, the black lead, yada, yada, yada. It's probably not a good series. Did you read it?
So that was just a few people, but a few really angry people coming at me on social media or on personal emails or things like that. Sometimes a little bit threatening even. We didn't want to go into your story because you were French. But then a friend of mine talked to me about it. I read it. I enjoy it now. Now I support you.
As someone who's watched Twitter and have seen a lot how Twitter works 9 times out of 10, that first tweet, don't even tag anybody. Don't use any hashtags. Just say something interesting. Maybe accompany it with a stellar image that people can engage with. And then you can have a thread of whatever else you want, whether you're linking it to where they can buy a product, in this case, these books, or just give out more detail where you can go into more detail where I did give the synopsis of the series. That's how to tweet, hence why the tweet went viral. It happened multiple times. And sometimes I'm not even mentioning diversity in it. For example, the way I tweeted about Apple Black Volume 1 went a little viral because of the books being available in Walmart. And in most Walmarts, this is where you'd find it, in the manga section. Imagine walking into Walmart, seeing the manga you created right next to these juggernauts. And as someone who's been a fan of Japanese manga for years, this is really cool to see. For My Manga, as well as all the other Saturday AM manga that will be in Walmart stores and Barnes & Noble and Waterstones and W.H. Smith, Right Stuff Anime, you name it. Anywhere manga is sold, good chance our books are there. Big shout out to Quarto, our distributors, for believing in us and helping make all this good stuff a reality. For the same formula. This tweet did very well, 20k something likes. I don't do this regularly. Most of my tweets don't get engagement like this unless I tweet like this. So this is also me giving you guys game on how to tweet to promote your stuff. And I've seen a couple people kind of adopt my formula. In fact, I'm even seeing some people on a completely separate topic talking about, hey, tweet like white. Because other people are noticing that that works. Now, unless Elon has changed things. It doesn't work all the time, but if you do it right, at the right time, this is how to do it. So it's not my fault I can't give you all the details in the first initial tweet. I'm the one who's been on the internet for years, using my experience and know-how to try and get this to work. But as usual, people showing more love, people who got it from Walmart, shout out to Walmart. Other tweets of ours showcasing some other series like Orsha, exploring West African mythology. The same way you see all this Norse stuff, you see a lot of Thor and all that kind of stuff. Here we're exploring West African mythology, specifically Nigerian, and that's in the Saturday annual book. And as usual, the first tweet is kind of like a headline with an engaging image, and then you go into detail if the person is interested. And if they're interested, then they'll check the thread. This tweet also did very well. A lot of people showing love, enjoying the killer fan art and character designs, this is how to tweet. If you don't like it, unfollow. You only have so many characters. You can't put all the details into one tweet anyways. If you did, Twitter, the algorithm will kind of see that, oh, this is an ad. You're trying to promote stuff. So it'll be suppressed. But if you tweet like this, that first tweet is just saying something that's interesting, like a headline. And then people are engaging with it by opening the thread and seeing more. So it looks less like an ad. It's almost like tricking the algorithm where it can't really read that you're trying to promote stuff, because if it does, if it's so obvious, then it'll be suppressed. Kind of hard to miss. You go, you see My Hero Academia, you see Attack on Titan, you know about those, but you're like, well, what's this Apple Black? You're probably gonna pick it up. Shout out to Walmart, they've shown our books hella love. But that tweet went viral again in the thread. Then I can go into more detail about stuff. You're not gonna come and tell me how to tweet or how to run my own account. If you don't like it, you don't have to be there. If you don't like the selling point of the diversity angle, you can ignore it and just go read the series, or ignore it as a whole if it's a turnoff. I'm not saying you can't have your opinion on it. You can have your opinion, but other people can have an opinion about your opinion. Because one of the cool things is, for a lot of these people, I didn't even have to say anything. Majority of the people who saw the tweet liked it. So they were the ones going back and forth with these people, not really me. Outside of a few people that, once it gets too crazy, I'm out. Go look at the quote retweets. Go look at the retweets, comments. They're still there. And despite the drama, I'm very appreciative of all those who showed the tweet love, who showed the books love. In fact, Clock Striker actually shot up from prior to the tweet. We hadn't really promoted the volume at all so far. And it just dropped on Amazon, available for pre-order. So the ranking was about 2 millionth book in all of Amazon or something like that. But after the tweet, it shot up to the top 2,000. A lot of people put it in their wish list. A lot of people pre-ordered it. A lot of people showed it all kinds of love, validating the point that people do care. Tweets with Apple Black went viral. Clock Striker went viral. Aura Show went viral. Oblivion Rouge. The list goes on. The series themselves are strong, even from some people who had issues with the tweet. They just want to complain 9 times out of 10. Oh, it's misleading. Oh, it's this, and you don't promote it this way. Oh, it's not the first. Oh, that's not a manga. Oh, if manga is anything, then Storm is the first. Did you read the tweet? And then it's the truth. And I do not deny that this is also promotion. It is promotion. While with Saturday AM, we want to add more diversity and representation to the Japanese approach to making animation and comics and all of that, while still being influenced by what happens here in Marvel. Like, we have influences not just from the Shonen Jumps of the world, but also from the Marvels of the world. Even pointed to with us having like a multiverse with all of our characters, some of our post-credit scenes in our books, where we try to be innovative with the books as well, where all the books have post-credit scenes. And some of the post-credit scenes kind of tease a multiverse, tease Saturday Wars, kind of like our Infinity War type thing that's coming. We're influenced by a lot of stuff, but our mission and what we want to do to make things a little bit more diverse, especially with that Japanese approach, not demanding it, by the way. We're still big fans of My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, Bleach, Naruto, One Piece, Gintama, the list goes on, right? People have their reasons as to, they're Japanese creators, so we're not out here fighting for, hey, everything should be, where are the black characters? Where are the Hispanic characters? Where are the this? Where's the that? Or nobody's demanding anything. We're just being the change we want to see. Hence why we're Western manga, Western anime, or Western comics, which it doesn't matter. It's still correct. So we're sincere in our mission, but it's also promotion. We also want the book to sell. We're also putting it in front of people we know would be interested in it. Of course, it's promotion too. And thankfully, like I said, all the people important to our business, to us, our fans, they get it. So I'm Gucci. We want the critical success and the commercial success. These guys do not care. Hence why they whitewashed the character. This was another one where somebody woke up and chose idiot. And I got a couple tweets of bananas at me for obvious, they're trying to troll, but to me all this stuff is hilarious, because then I'll post it And then more people find out about the series. It's like they're actually helping if you think about it. Golly gee, at least improve on your Microsoft Paint. I posted this during the whole Ariel Little Mermaid craze to prove a point. People who are up in arms about that, they don't really care. Like 9 times out of 10, they don't care. Some people are just trying to be right. Some people just want to drop their 2 cents. And some people are, I'm sorry, they love race cars. Because then in the thread, I do the usual thing where I share what the series is about, how it's original, all the things that I think people will like about it. I was even more specific this time because of how the first time that tweet went super viral. I knew people were going to come with arguments again this time, so I actually went into a slightly more detail. But, you know, it's never enough. And then when you look at the person who posted the fix, someone pointed out that their location was anywhere without black people. So these are, these are trolls. These are racist too. These are all kinds of weirdos. But at the end of the day, you're just helping to make sure more people find out about this series. So, thank you. And then as usual, the person got roasted and more of the hypocrisy thrown at them. A couple funny memes from the Boondocks. Like, y'all can pause and read some of these. Some are actually hilarious. There are people who actually make quote retweets smoking all these fools. That the retweets or the quote retweets of you guys went viral with yours as well. With, tens and thousands of people sharing and engaging. They see you making your own original stuff. They can't help themselves. They can't. They even whitewashed the Apple Black one. And y'all chiming in, giving your 2 cents, and letting them have a piece of your mind. And these guys are like not correct in the head. If you go through their feed, it's all weird stuff. These are the kind of things they repost or talk about, and the weird stuff that they say. You can kind of tell the type. So it's like, you know what? You do you, sir. All our books, even our How to Draw a Diverse Manga book, everything. Shout out to everybody who supported the books, using the terms, letting them know that we want content that is more representative of the world around us. We want diverse characters, a diverse world, diverse creators, diverse ideas in ways that can enhance the story. We already understand. We know the story is paramount. None of this works if the story is A55. But where applicable, not just in ethnicity, but in size, height, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, like we mentioned, and so much more, we want people to see themselves in their heroes. These people exist too. One of the things I've noticed is some of these people can stomach diverse content. They just don't like when it's proudly celebrating that. They don't like when it's proudly black or proudly Hispanic or proudly anything. Like, people were angry at the fact that you weren't Japanese?
Yeah, the fact that you tackle something that is... people get really personal with the thing that define their community, and in manga there are many communities, and because that belongs to them, and that's a cool thing on many ways, but because that belongs to them, some of them they see a non-Japanese artist coming in,
intruder,
they say, yeah, intruder, that's it. So they have a feeling of, oh no, not for me, and sometimes, oh, not for me, and I will tell everybody that's it's not fun for them also.
That's why, even though, like I said, 95% of what I saw was positive, but you still have these little pockets like that 5%, and it's still the same 5%, but on different sites, whether it be Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, talking that noise. They blackwashed the character, for example. They blackwashed Cass from Clock Striker. They blackwashed Opal from Apple Black. It's just proving my point that they don't really care about the argument. It's just chaos. They're just trolling in some cases, but it's also proving the point, hence why we call it out and not just leave it there. Some people are like, oh, why are you giving them the attention? One, because we want to call out the fact that it doesn't matter what you do, they don't really care. And then two, the trolls and the racists don't like it. It's probably doing something right. And that's just an extra opportunity to talk about your stuff. Another argument is, oh, it's not shonen. Some people think, oh, to be shonen, it has to be a male lead. Come on. Soul Eater, Claymore, Promised Neverland. That argument's already dead. Oh, it's not shonen because of this and that. Look, shonen is a genre / demo where it's aimed at a young male audience, even though it goes beyond that. There are lots of girls who like Demon Slayer and My Hero Academia, like clearly, obviously. But that's the primary demo, at least the intended demo. And Clock Striker passes. Very action-packed, adventure, comedy. It's no different than the examples I gave of a Full Metal Alchemist or a Naruto. So it fits the demo, and it fits the genre that it's usually in, with exciting style content aimed at that young audience. Just because it's a black female lead doesn't mean it's not a shonen. They will look for any argument under the sun just to discredit you in any kind of way. And it won't work, because at the end of the day, you're not changing anybody's mind. Not changing mind. So they did a little fixes. You fixed it in Microsoft Paint. Same way you're free to express your displeasure. People can express their displeasure of your displeasure. I find you offensive for finding me offensive. Wise words. But in closing, I think I've touched on everything I could possibly think of. Just remember that I remember none of this matters ultimately. Whether you view it as a seinen, shonen, manga, comic, manhwa, whatever, if you don't, hell, you can think she's white. What matters the most is the critical and commercial success of the series, of all of our series. And slowly but surely, thanks to the support that we have been getting, we're getting there. Books all over the world, Israel, Ireland, Nigeria, obviously America, UK, Canada, Australia, Germany.
You talk about the influence and you look at, like you said, people all over the world who have lived, breathed, eaten this stuff growing up. And when they put that spirit onto paper or onto the screen and they draw and they tell their story, even if it's not 100% the same. First of all, no manga, Japanese manga is very different. You can see completely different types of manga. So the whole thought, that a character has to look exactly the same is already silly. But if one of your artists is drawing something and it's speaking from their soul and it's authentic and it's connecting with the reader, that's what matters.
Books are going worldwide, more and more. Translations are coming. More bookstores are taking it. Walmart showing us love. Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, Right Stuff Anime, Right Stuff, Indigo, Chapters, W.H. Smith, Waterstone. We're getting out there. Hopefully one day in anime. Working with major companies, international companies, Japanese companies, helping spread the word even further from a digital standpoint. Clock Striker by Frederick Jones and Isaka Galadima. Apple Black by me. All the other series, Massive Multiplayer World of Ghosts, Yellow Stringer, Hammer, Saigami, Oblivion Rouge, Titan King, Saturday Annual, The How to Draw book, Henshin, Gunhild. More and more books are coming. We're still small and fairly new, but we're growing, making moves, generally vastly happy and positive book reviews for the series that are out. We keep getting better every year. Our art, stories, worlds, missions, creators, reflective of the world around us. Seeing yourself in your heroes and representative in every sense. This is not to say that you can't relate to Peter Parker or I can't relate to Peter Parker just because I'm black. They try to straw man that thing. It's like, oh, you can't relate to unless the character's black. That's not the point. I can relate to Peter Parker. I do like Peter Parker. But Peter Parker is actually diverse in the fact that he's broke. And it's part of the reason why he got popular in the first place, because a lot of people can relate to being broke. Now, can't they? The point is that there are more ways to be diverse. There are more ways to be representative of the world around us, and ethnicity is part of it. It's not the only. There are others which we try to represent inside the AM as well. Spiderman being broke is diverse, financial diversity. If I send this video to you, you watch the whole thing, you still disagree, that's fine. That's fine. Sometimes maybe you are arguing from a place of sincerity and you're not a troll. But it doesn't change the fact that if you don't agree, then you should be able to agree to disagree so we can move on. Because if you still disagree, then my man, I can't help you. I can't. And was this video also a way to promote the books? Nowadays, everybody want to talk like they got something to say. But nothing comes out